everyone. This is Gilbert Jalad. I'm talking to you here from CPLSPA downtown Orlando with Tufts on Tax, where all your tax questions are answered right here with Mr. T. Scott Tufts. He is the master and the expert when it comes to taxes and tax law. How are you, Scott? How are you today?
Good to be with you.
Good to be with you too, and I see that we are touching a few topics that just came up on the news lately. But before I go there, I wanted to ask you a little bit about, I know we did Tufts on Tax webinar, and it was a little bit different than your usual webinars. And how did you feel between, your guest Evelyn Pavon Figueroa and attorney Aubrey Ducker, and also the audience, which mostly attorneys and mediators?
Yeah, I thought it was a great format to give our audience some things they could take with them, but presented in a way that isn't as complex or like too technical.
Yeah.
So I thought that we gave them some very practical tips, and I think that is a better way to go about some of the stuff that we're trying to get out there with in terms of information, so that they can grab hold of that. So I thought it was very good in that regard. Having Evelyn and Aubrey there was good because I wanted that feedback and a little bit of different presentment. Mm-hmm. I think when two people are talking, I think for some reason it's easier to follow than one.
Correct.
So you'll see a lot of podcasts with two, people. That's true. Because I think it gives some different intonation and reflection. I don't know. So I think that'll work.
From their knowledge and their legal knowledge and different practices and different aspects of them, and responding to what you were asking them and about the forms and all that, that was very interesting.
Yeah, it's really a good give and take, and I think the podcast formula with an interview type approach or with a give and take approach also is more exciting for people, I think.
Yes, absolutely. I agree. And it was really also many parts of it was entertaining to watch, going back and forth on the subjects and the issues.
Yeah, and the topic being one that, a form that can get you sued is kind of an interesting way in the title alone that kind of grabs your attention. You say, really? How does that happen? And then you start giving them that information.
Yeah, absolutely. So going back to the topics that we wanted to tackle today, one of them was special IRS team working to identify new abusive transactions. That's one.
Yeah. So let me hit that one. We'll hit each of these. But
okay.
So abusive transactions. Tufts on Tax here, we're talking about different tax forms. And one of the tax form areas that can get into this is the IRS has a form, and they've had it for quite some time, called a Form 8886. And that actually is intended to identify transactions that the government hears about and wants you to tell them in advance that you entered into one of them, and you then flag it on your return so that they can look at it. In other words, think about a transaction where it's too good to be true, but maybe it'll work because the tax code is so complicated, and you do it. The IRS might say, well, if it looks and acts like this kind of transaction, we're going to list it, and you're going to have to identify it. We're going to put the onus on the people doing the tax return, and then if you don't disclose it, then the statute of limitations will never run, and the IRS will then penalize you for not disclosing that you got into something a little aggressive. So, So think about this, and we'll go through an example. Well, in fact, let's do that. So how does this happen? So, on my website, I'm able to diagram these transactions, but they all start to kind of have a similar feel to them, which is, and so let me go to an example, and then I think that'll help us. So breaking in the news is a case that's come out out of the Supreme Court of Georgia, Co v. Proskauer Rose, LLP. The long and short of this is that way back, and I can like this, right? Because this is a 2002 situation.
Oh, wow. 2002.
And the case is, what year are we?
22.
That's 20 years later.
Yeah.
So there are some taxpayers, and these are the Coes, okay? And in 2002, they sold their company, and they had a significant interest in their companies. Well, that creates some proceeds, money, and they had to have taxes to pay on that. And they, being good stewards of their money, but knowing they had a big tax hit coming, went to their accounting firm and asked them, hey, look, we have this big tax hit. Is there any legally acceptable means by which we can reduce the amount of taxes we're going to owe? And they said, yes, there are. And they said, here's a legal strategy that we know about that we can help you get into. And we even know that, but you're going to need a legal opinion, an independent opinion to support it. So you understand what's going on? So you go to your accountant. The accountant says, yes, you can do this. Here's how you can reduce the taxes you owe. You got to go and enter into this transaction, and then you're going to need a legal opinion. And they say, and here's the firm that can do the legal opinion.
Like you.
A law firm, yes. Yeah, somebody separate. And they do that. And they get what they think is, or they understand to be, an independent opinion.
Okay.
All right?
Interesting.
And they do that. Now, 4 years go by, so that's 2005. The IRS audits them, okay, and this transaction. And in 2012, they settle with the IRS.
Okay.
That's the taxpayer. Wow. So the taxpayers get audited. They settle, and they have to pay a lot of money.
So 10 years later.
Yes. And by 2015, they say, you know what? I don't feel good about that. I feel like we ought to be able to sue them for malpractice.
Who's suing?
So the Coes are suing the law firm that gave the opinion, the independent tax opinion.
Wow.
But the reason why is that it wasn't independent, because the law firm allegedly was involved in the structuring of the transaction that saved them the money to begin with.
Oh, wow.
In other words, they created the strategy on how to do it, and it involved something complicated, and that's how many of these shelters are. They're very complicated, but at the end of the day, you're doing something with a party that may be what we call tax indifferent. So what is that? You find a foreign company that doesn't have U.S. taxes to pay, or something like that, and then you invest with that, and then it generates a loss somehow, and then you put it on your tax form. I mean, that's an oversimplification, but something like that. But what's interesting to me is that they sue in December 2015, and what's great about this, or not great, but interesting to me, is that they get thrown out of court because the argument is everyone knew that these tax shelters were going bad, and they should have sued sooner. And the reason why they said sooner was that 60 Minutes had put on a show, TV, one of their shows, reporting on some of these transactions that have been done this way. But the Coes said, we never watched 60 Minutes. So the lower court had said, well, look, you had an obligation to, you should have known, and therefore said you have sued too late. Statute of limitations.
Regardless if you
regardless of the validity of your thing, you sued that law firm too late because you waited around and so forth. But what the Georgia Supreme Court appears to me to be saying is, if the Coes did not watch 60 Minutes and did not know, honestly, within this period, and I still think they got to do it at a trial in front of a jury or something, but they are trying to establish that they didn't know, they didn't watch 60 Minutes, and if that's believed, right, they didn't know, then they filed as soon as they could and timely. And what they're attacking is, they're saying that if you're not independent, you had a duty to tell them. So where I'm going with this, Gilbert, is your professionals have a job to do, and if they're rendering an opinion, they need to do that properly. And if you go to a professional and they have some reason why their opinion may be jaded or something, you try and tell that should be disclosed. Or if you can't be independent, that should be disclosed. Or if you have any reservations, that should be disclosed. And certainly if you were involved in the right? I mean, let's go to the car line. If I help build the car and then the wheels fall off the car, right? And then you come to me and say, give me an opinion as to whether the car was properly put together. And I say, yes, it was. But I was the one who also built the car.
Yeah.
That might be a problem.
Yeah.
Right? Maybe?
Absolutely.
Okay. So that's kind of the gist of it. I mean, it's an oversimplification, but this case is kind of in the news, and I thought...
and from 2002.
Yeah, and that tells me something we should tell our audience too. And that is, I think there's a lot of folks out there that get into a mindset that there might be a 3-year rule or something, and that's the only window you need to worry about. Well, I think our audience needs to know that that's not always the case, right? Statute of limitations can go further back, can be told, they can be stopped and go.
Or even lower.
Yeah, so I think if you are on the plaintiff side and you're looking to sue somebody, don't assume that it's been too long. Get some good advice on what you're concerned about.
Correct.
And I think with the IRS and taxes, and I think with taxes, same thing. If you've got a tax issue and you think it's too old, still get it looked at and see if there's something you need to do.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good advice.
And
you don't want it to drag 20 years in court.
Well, I mean, that's no fun for anyone, so I get that.
Absolutely.
But anyway, this new group that the IRS has put out is interesting to me because they're going to focus on new abuses. And so you'll like this, Gilbert. So how long do you think tax shelters have existed?
Not sure.
Do you know what a tax shelter is?
No, what is a tax shelter?
Well,
maybe we can clarify that to the audience.
Okay, so let's go back to colonial times, shall we? And let's say that you have your house on the street, and the way they used to tax you is how much frontage you took of the street, right? And you would pay more taxes the wider part of the road you took in having your house. Got it? So maybe it would be prudent to build a very narrow door that fronts the road, and then have it go back and be taller and bigger out back.
Yeah.
Right?
I see.
That might be paying the minimal amount of taxes, but maximizing the size of your house. Right? You see that? That would be saving taxes, right?
Well, it looks like.
Right, and if I'm next to you and you have your, of course, much bigger house and much mansion, it'll be a mansion. Your house might be right on the road, and you might have to pay more taxes if we lived back in those days, right? So I might be sheltering and paying less tax than you, and you might say, well, why do you have such a goofy-looking house? And I'll
even
say,
though both of them
even though we have the same square footage.
Exactly.
Well, you still probably have. I mean, but you know what I mean.
Yeah,
but that is the idea. So tax shelters in that kind of way, everybody, it's been a sport for as long as we know. And dare I say that, we worry about in the tax system trying to make it more simplified, right, and all that. So I think we come back to this idea of it's complicated, and with complexity comes an opportunity to, how do we say it, use the complexity against itself so you pay less taxes, right? Right. If I come up to a transaction and it's really complicated, maybe it's too much for you to figure out, right? Right. So anyway, that's kind of what started to happen after Enron in the early part of the 2000, and it got kind of out of hand, and then typical shift back to crush it, or to put a stop in it, deter it. And then now I think what's happening with J-Read is they're going to put a special group on top of this to see if there's abusive transactions occurring now. So it looks to me like they're kind of ramping up again to look at what's going on there. So our audience needs to know, if you're involved in anything that touches on taxes, that you kind of sit back and say, you know, that just seems too good to be true. That's a sign you need to have somebody independently look at it. Okay?
Like Mr. T. Scott Tufts, that will help you in that matter. And don't assume, like he said. Thank you, Scott. And of
next
course,
time we'll
definitely
get into the others and keep at this. I expect we're in a time of year where the taxes that are being done right now are your entity taxes, partnerships, and so forth, and then they get their K-1s out, and then people under extension bring those K-1s into their return. So this is a good time where the complexity comes out. So if any of you have any kind of questions about a transaction you pursued that is complex, or you have concerns about it, definitely get to your advisor. If not me, then your qualified accountant or someone of that sort to really make sure it's going to pass muster.
Absolutely. You heard him, folks. You can call us at 877-647-7887. Again, that number is 877-647-7887. If you're watching YouTube, it will be on the screen. And you can also email him at stufts@cplspa.com. That's stufts@cplspa.com. You can visit also our website at cplspa.com. You can go on his profile and you can check all kinds of stuff, and we have all the episodes as well on there. Thank you and have a wonderful day.